Hey guys, welcome. This is Catherine and this is Little Bits of Heaven Homestead, where everything we do is a little bit of heaven. So today I am setting up my chick brooder. If you guys remember, or if you haven't watched that video, about 2 weeks ago I started putting eggs into my incubator. I am kind of an incubating fool. I've got an incubating addiction, some would say. I do take losses because I have an open range policy with our flock, and we're pretty wide open here. I do have perimeter fence as far as like a 4-wire, I think it might be a 5-wire barbed wire, but it doesn't really keep the predators out, and nor do we really want to. Part of what we love about where we live is that we coexist with nature, and part of coexisting is that we have predators. They roam our yard, and my food tends to be their food as well. So I have taken more losses this year than I have in my entire 5 years of homesteading. And so I really geared up my act, and I have been incubating like crazy over the last 12 months. And so I don't necessarily have a batch in the incubator all the time, but it's pretty dang close. Hey, Kicking It with Karen. Welcome. Thanks for joining me. So today I am making sure that my brooder is ready to go. My incubator has a countdown on it, and it tells me that I am about 6 days until hatch. And so this is about the time that I start looking at my brooder and making sure that I am ready. When my first chicks start hatching, I know that I've got about 24, 48, maybe 72 hours before I need to shift them over. And so I like to make sure that this is ready to go. So let me see, let me catch that comment real quick if I can. So Anastasia says, hello Catherine, greetings from Greece. Natasha, oh, I'm so excited that you make it. That's so cool. So, and then Kicking It with Karen says, what is a brooder? North Star Prep Setter says, evening Catherine, glad it's warmer. So a brooder is the transitional area that you would move a chick just after it's hatched until it's big enough to go outside. Typically you want to wait until the chicks are fully feathered. I'm not necessarily that nice. They feather out fully, usually somewhere to 4 to 6 weeks-ish. My goal is always to have my chicks out 3 to 4 weeks-ish. But for the next 3 to 4 weeks after they hatch, they will be staying in what is called a brooder. And so what I use, and there's all sorts of different ways that you can brood chickens, brood ducklings, brood whatever small birds that it is, or even large birds. But it's the transitional area that you want to put them into before they're ready to go outside. And there's some important things that you need to know about a brooder. As far as keeping the birds warm, that is one of your top priorities. And I want to talk about fire risk. That right there. A heat lamp is a huge, huge fire risk. And it doesn't matter how secure you've got it, and I want to show you why. So let's see if I can stretch mine over. In the bottom of my brooder, and typically a lot of brooders, you will have pine shavings. And chicks, they scratch a lot. And I don't know if you guys can see this. Yeah, you can see that. Look at that layer. So they throw this fine dust all over everything. And the entire inside of my shed is coated with it. I don't know if you can see. I try to come in here a couple times a year and really clean it. This is really all I use this shed for, is brooding, so I'm not too concerned about the layers of dust that accumulate on the shelves. I do have major concerns about the dust that accumulates on this. And I try to clean it off daily when I have chicks in the brooder. And I will typically take it out, blow it off, and then take a rag to it. So I do have, this is not my primary heat source, and I only use it for a couple of days. Typically all I do with it is keep the ambient air in my shed warm. And I'll show you what I do use as a heat source. I'm just going to set this down. It does not live in here. It typically hangs there for the first couple days. But I'm stuck. So this is my preferred heat source. And let's see, there we go. So this is from Brinsea. There are other brands that are cheaper, and what this is a radiant heat plate. And so the chicks, they can climb up underneath it, and it's a radiant heat source, so it doesn't get hot to the touch per se. It is not a fire risk in the same way that a heat lamp is. You can feel safe and secure having this going 24 hours a day, right on top of pine shavings, having your chicks even touch this, and it's not a risk as far as burning them or burning your house down. So if I were brand new to brooding chicks and looking for some sort of heat source, this is what I would go with. Not necessarily this brand, but some sort of radiant heat plate, because it's going to minimize your fire risk tremendously. And believe me, there is a huge risk involved whenever you put any sort of heat source together with pine shavings and or this pine dust. There's risk involved. So if you can mitigate your risks, I am all about mitigating risks just in my lifestyle. And in fact, that's what my homesteading journey has been. It's taking control, mitigating risks, eliminating things that I have concerns about putting into and onto our bodies. And so it kind of is counterproductive if you start taking on this lifestyle and then adding risk to it. So if you can find ways to minimize and mitigate risk, do it by all means. And this is one way I strongly suggest about going about it as far as brooding baby birds. So what I use for my brooder, and I don't know if you guys can see it, I use a 100-gallon tank trough, water trough. You can use any sort of large container. I've seen lots of people use like kids swimming pools. I've seen people use small rubber totes. I don't know that they're necessarily rubber, but the plastic bins that you would use for storage. And I've seen where they have taken the lid, cut the lid off, and then put some sort of screening over it. If I am brooding ducklings, I have no worries about them escaping. It's the ducks that I tend to raise, and maybe this will be different now that I'm transitioning into Muscovies, but the ducks that I typically raise are land ducks. I don't have an issue with them flying. I don't think Muscovies fly when they're little, so I'm not going to have that issue. But chicks can fly surprisingly early. So I do have a piece of chicken wire that after the first couple days of having chicks in here, then I'll put chicken wire over the top just to keep them contained, because there's nothing worse than losing chicks to your own environment and being unable to find them. So, and this is a shed. I do have junk in here, so there's lots of little hiding places. So try to keep them secure and contained in there. So as far as food and water goes, it's what you would expect for chicks. So they do sell these little feeders. What I like to do, because any baby anything, well actually animal anything is a mess. And so what I like to do is I typically like 5-gallon bucket lids, and I'll flip one upside down, and then I put a pie pan on it, and then I put my water inside that pie pan. And they're still gonna make a mess, they're still gonna get shavings inside there, but it keeps it fresh water for a longer period of time. So you do want to check them a couple times a day just to make sure that they've got fresh food and water. So as far as feeding goes, I also have a feeder just like this. You can use a little plate, just something shallow that they can get into. I'm hoping that when my chicks start hatching, I can take you guys along with the process on how to move them to a brooder. Their yolk inside the egg is their food source as they grow inside the egg, and typically when they hatch, you don't need to worry about food or water for about 72 hours. You want to definitely wait until they are fully dry. You don't want to move a wet chick. When they first hatch, they are very wet. Their feathers are sticky. They could chill and die relatively quick. So do make sure that they're fully dried out before you move them to your brooder. And you'll want to dip their beaks into water just so that they're familiar with how to drink and where to find that water source. So these, I do have polyvisol. It's a baby vitamin and mineral. It's a liquid. If you're going to add that to your chicks and or ducklings water, which is always a good idea just to kind of give them a boost when they're first hatched, make sure you buy it without iron. So they do offer the baby vitamins with and without iron. I always go without iron. If you're brooding ducklings, you want to add brewer's yeast for the niacin to their food, at least for the first couple weeks. So I've done it without, I've raised healthy ducklings without, but it's just one of those nutritional things that is good for them, and I think it helps prevent splay leg. I'm not positive on that, but I do know that they benefit from the added niacin. So some quick tips and tricks there. And then because I'm a mom, and I have noticed that my babies always like something to cuddle with. So I always put a stuffed animal of some sort in there. This is my broody bear. It gets taken out and washed with every single batch of chicks, but they will hide underneath there. They tuck themselves underneath. It's just a nice little safe, warm place. Makes my mama's heart happy for whatever reason. So that's really it. There's not a whole lot of complications. You do want to have a different feed than you would feed your adult chickens, as I do buy a chick grower, and it's specifically for little tiny growing chicks and healthy bodies. And it's typically like a powdered, where I'm feeding pellets to the adults, and the babies, they wouldn't be able to eat the pellets, so that powdered substance is better for them as far as being able to access and eat and get nutrition from their feed. So that's really all there is to it, guys. So in about 5 days, my chick should be hatching. So Kicking It with Karen says, so cute, a broody bear. Yeah, I've got an emotional thing. All of my clutches have a broody bear of some sort. So I'm hoping in 5 days that I can show you pips and zips on eggs and show you the process of hatching, and then a couple days later show you the transition to the brooder, because it is always exciting to welcome new life onto the homestead. It's this journey is really all about growth and self-sustainability and making sure you've got healthy, happy food. And so once you get to the point where you are able to reproduce your own animals, it's really empowering, and it's really exciting and fun to see little life, and there is nothing cuter than baby anything. So thanks for joining me, guys. I hope you have a great evening. If you do have any questions, feel free to leave them down below, and I will try and get to them. Sometimes I'm not always right on top of it, but I do try to come back. So we shall talk to you later. And North Star Prep Setter says you're so knowledgeable. Let's see, I want to get back to that. How exciting to have some little chicks. It's like my favorite time of year. So baby anything is fun. Hey Lana, welcome. So another New Mexican, way. So, alright guys, so that's all I have. I'll be popping off now, and we shall see you later. Thanks for joining me.